friends, Chubby Meeple, back with another Kickstarter preview for you, and today we're going to take a look at Set a Watch. Now this is a game designed by Todd Walsh and published by Rock Manor Games. It's going to be it's a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players, set in a fantasy setting. Let's jump to the table. I'll give you a brief overview of how the game plays, kind of walk you through it quickly, and then I'll come back here and give you my thoughts on Set a Watch. When setting up for a game of Set a Watch, it's important to remember that at all times you will have 4 adventurers playing in the game, regardless of how many players you have. So in a 4-player game, each player is going to control 1 adventurer. If 2 players are playing, you're each going to have 2. If you're playing a solo game, which you can do, you will control 4 heroes during the course of the game. And this is important because of the mechanics of the game and how things work. You'll see that in a second. When setting up the game, you want to set your campfire board, which is your main board, in the center of the table. You want to place your rest tokens kind of nearby. You can put them on the board like I have here, set them nearby. These tokens will be used to identify which of your adventurers are staying in camp each round, because you're going to play 9 rounds, and over the course of each round, 1 adventurer stays back at camp to take camp actions and support the adventurers who have gone out and adventured to various locations. You're also going to select obviously your adventurers, and your adventurers card has a lot of information on it. You obviously have your portrait. You also will select 3 random adventurer cards from your adventurer deck. So you see the rogue here, we have 3 cards that have been selected: Poison Blade, Stay Dead, and Shadow Scout. And there are also 2 other cards that go with the rogue: Rally and Backstab. And there are different things that can allow you to swap these out as the game progresses. Some special hero abilities will allow you to do it as well. So each adventurer is going to take their adventure card. This adventurer card, you're also going to take your 3 adventurer. You can take your adventurer mat and your 3 adventure cards, which are going to be your special abilities through the course of the game. You're also going to take the die indicated by your die type indicated by your mat. So on the rogue rolls d6s as indicated by the shape of the die here, and our dwarf up here rolls d8s. So each adventurer is going to have 3 die, either 3d6s or 3d8s. You're going to have your 3 adventure cards, and you're going to randomly select one of those 3 cards to flip face down. So you can see the Stay Dead card here is kind of grayed out, as is Wound, Chaos Blast, and Elf Senses. They are flipped over. They're kind of dormant at this point. You'll always start the game with 1 inactive or exhausted adventurer trait. Your mat also shows whether your adventurer is a ranged or a melee adventurer, and that will come into play when we're attacking the creatures that are coming into camp. We'll talk about that in a second. Once you have selected your 4 adventurers, collected your dice and your adventurer cards, the next thing we need to do is we need to prepare the various decks of cards that are going to be used during the game. We have a creature deck, which is this deck here. And then the creature deck, these are the creatures that you're going to fight that will be coming into camp. So here's an example of the Treant. This shows the damage that they do. So he does 1 damage if he gets into camp. If he's not defeated, he has 8 health. This is a special ability or action that will activate. In this case, when they're defeated, we increase the fire by 2. And then, of course, the name of the creature and the creature type. Creature types can come into play as well. You're going to have a deck of 30 creatures. And based on the difficulty level that you want, you're also going to shuffle in a number of these summon cards. And these summon cards will be used to bring Unhallowed, which are your more powerful enemies, into the game. And in the deck we've prepared up here, there are 2 summon cards in there, 1 in the top half and 1 in the bottom half. So that is that deck. You will then also take your deck of Unhallowed, which are other creatures, and these are again, they're bigger creatures. They do more damage. They have more health. They generally have some bigger defeated abilities and things that will trigger when they're revealed. So for example, if this one gets revealed, you place the top 2 undead creatures that are in the graveyard in front of the Necromancer. So you're going to shuffle this deck of cards. You're going to, without looking, draw and place 1 Unhallowed face down up here in this stack inside the box, at least in this case, inside the box. This is going to create the Horde. The Horde is going to be used at the end of the game in round 9, so the more cards that get added to that Horde, the stronger or the more difficult your final round is going to be. You will then draw 8 Unhallowed from the Unhallowed deck and place them face up near camp so that you can see the next Unhallowed, and that is also important in terms of bringing those Unhallowed into play. You then are going to take your location deck, and the location deck is quite lengthy. There are quite a lot of locations that you're going to have. And you are going to pull out, I left it on the board, you're going to pull out the Forbidden Tower. This will be the final location that you will play. and you'll place that on the bottom of the deck. You'll then pull 8 random locations out of the deck, which these will give you different abilities for the battles, as well as what's going to affect your campfire, and the number of creatures you're going to encounter, as well as some kind of special battle rule for that particular location. And we'll discuss that here in a second. But you're going to pull 8 cards out. You're going to place those on top of the Forbidden Tower so that you have a deck of 9 cards since you play 9 rounds. And then the unused locations are going to get returned into another stack, because you can end up scouting ahead and finding other locations and swapping those out. And we'll see that in a little bit here. Once you have that set up, the next thing you need to do is set your starting campfire value to 8. You can also alter that difficulty by rolling a d8 and setting the campfire to whatever number you roll. And the campfire is going to be important because that is how many creatures that are attacking camp are going to be revealed, or how many will be visible, how many you can attack. And we'll take a look at that when we dive into gameplay. Gameplay takes place over a few phases. The first thing we need to do is we need to reveal the location that we're going to be playing. So that simply means we take the top card off the location deck and we reveal it. In this case, it's the Sacred City. And this card gives us some information. First of all, it tells us what to do with our starting fire value. So in this case, we're going to lower it by 3. So we'll do that now. So we're going to take it from 8 down to 5. This also shows that we're going to reveal or pull 6 creature cards from the creature deck. And this says to choose an unhallowed to seal, and then shuffle the unhallowed deck. When you seal a creature, sealing simply means that you're going to remove them from the graveyard and place it at the bottom of the unhallowed deck. And since this is our first location, we don't have a graveyard. We haven't killed any creatures yet, so there are no unhallowed in the graveyard, so there's no unhallowed to seal. And sealing becomes powerful because as you kill creatures, they go into a creature discard pile, and those creatures can come back in later rounds. Whereas if we seal this, it goes back out of our creature graveyard, it would go back into the unhallowed deck to the bottom of this deck and wouldn't come out when we reshuffle the graveyard. So this is going to be our first city, or our first location. The next thing we need to do before we draw any creature cards or do any kind of battling is we need to roll the dice. So each adventurer is going to take all 3 of their dice and roll them. So our rogue is going to roll their 3d6s, our dwarf rolls the 3d8s, and then the wizard and the ranger are going to do the same thing. Let's grab the ranger here. And then based on the die rolls, looking at what we have on these dice, and I'll just kind of set them on the cards so we can see them here. Before we do anything else, now we have to decide which of our 4 adventurers is going to stay in camp and take camp actions during this particular round. There are a couple things that can contribute to that decision. One of those things being low die rolls. If you roll some low numbers, it may not be good to send that adventurer out to battle the creatures because you don't have high dice to use in your battle to deal damage with. The other thing that is important to take into consideration is one of the camp actions you can take is activating runes, which allow you to seal, vanquish, or bolster your heroes, your party members. In order to use runes, you have to have either a pair of the same number, doubles, or triples, either one. But you have to have at least doubles in order to use the runes. So in this case, our dwarf rolled a 4, and a 7, so maybe we want to leave them in camp, just because they have the ability to use the runes. And maybe we don't. We have a 2, 4, and a 6 with our rogue, 1, 5, and 6 with the wizard, 2, 6, and 8 with our elf ranger up here. And so it's important, let's say we'll leave the dwarf. So we're going to take one of these rest tokens, we're going to place it down here over the camp icon. This indicates that the dwarf has rested in camp once. And every adventurer is going to rest in camp twice. So you see this says times 1 with a little tent icon on it. If I flip this over, you'll see it's a times 2. So the next time the dwarf stays in camp, we'll flip this over to the times 2 side. And then once it's on the times 2 side, the dwarf will no longer be allowed to remain in camp. He will have to go out and fight the creatures. So in this case, the dwarf is here. The dwarf will be staying in camp, and the dwarf will be taking camp actions. And the first thing we need to do is take camp actions before we go into combat. Your camp actions are spelled out on the board. You can chop firewood. Chopping firewood simply means that you're going to take one of your die, you're going to place it in this square, and you're going to increase the firewood by 2. You're going to increase the campfire by 2. And that allows you that lightens your camp up, makes a bigger fire, more light. You can see and fight more creatures as they're trying to invade your camp. You also have the ability to scout ahead. If you choose to scout ahead, you're going to draw and look at the top 2 creatures. You're going to rearrange them however you want. You're going to return each card to either the bottom or the top of the creature deck. So it kind of gives you, it lets you kind of see ahead of time what's coming. If there's a big nasty creature and you see you don't have the dice among your 3 adventurers to fight something nasty, it gives you the opportunity to put a larger creature on bottom of the creature deck. And that simply means you have to place a die here, and then your next placement needs to be a larger die to allow you to scout again. So you're going to have to increase those in value. You can check the map by placing a 4 on the check map option. Checking the map lets you draw the top card of the map deck and the top card from the unused locations deck. So we take the top card from here, we take the top card from the unused locations, and then we get to pick one and return it to the top of the map deck. So it allows us to choose another location if we don't like the next location we're coming to. And we simply need a 4 on a die to do that. We have the option to heal. If we heal, we place a 6, and it has to be an exact 6 on this heal space, and that allows us to refresh one of our exhausted adventurer cards, either on ourself or on another adventurer that's on the watch. So you have that option. You also have the ability to equip. Equipping, you place 1 die there. You can do it once, and this allows you to swap an adventurer card that's on your player board with one of the adventurer cards that is out of play at the time. So in this case, our dwarf is in camp. He has Wound, Cleave, and Giant's Bane as his abilities. If he wanted to acquire Berserker or Throw Axe as an ability, then he could do so by simply using the equip action, and that allows him to swap that card out there. Using the runes, as I said, requires either doubles or triples, and that allows you to do 3 actions, either sealing, vanquishing, or bolstering. Now our dwarf, since he stayed in camp, has 2 4s, so he could use the rune actions. We would place one of those 4s on one action. So let's say we do seal. If we do seal, as we discussed earlier with the ability that we saw in our Sacred City, sealing simply means we take an unhallowed out of the creature discard, we put it on the bottom of the unhallowed deck, and then that keeps them from coming back into the rotation. Vanquishing allows us to remove the top hero or the top unhallowed from the horde deck, whatever that top card is. It could be an unhallowed, it could just be a standard creature. There are things that will cause creatures to get added to the horde, but we could use the vanquish action and remove the top card from the horde deck. Right now there's only 1 card in the deck. That might not be a bad action, because then we would have nothing in the horde. We'd be starting from scratch. The other option is we can place a die on bolster on the back of the location cards. These are where the 3 rune locations are. If we bolster, it allows all adventurers on the watch, so the ones that are going out and fighting, it allows them to re-roll their lowest die. So we're going to take these 2 4s, I'm going to place them onto bolster and vanquish. So we're going to put a 4 on bolster. We're going to put a 4 on vanquish. Vanquish lets us take this horde deck, this top card from the horde, out of the horde, and it removes it from the game. So this particular creature is gone. There's no way it can come back into the game. So just to show you what we did, we pulled the Wyvern Rider out of the horde. This would have been 12 damage to fight. It would have taken 12 damage, and then all wyverns that are in the graveyard get placed behind the rider in the line. So it would have added, if we had any other wyvern creatures in the graveyard, it would have added them to our creature deck. But we pulled them out of the deck, so we don't have to worry about the Wyvern Rider. They're out of the game. They won't come back in. By bolstering, we allow each adventurer, so our rogue, our wizard, and our elf ranger, to re-roll their lowest die. So the rogue's going to re-roll the 2 and get a 6, so that's a little better. Wizard gets to re-roll their 1, we roll a 5, and then our elf ranger is going to re-roll their 2, and they get a 3. So 3, 6, and 8 for our elf ranger. And then the dwarf can take their final action. And they're going to take the 7, and they're going to put it down on their own ability, the wood axe. This allows them to increase the firewood by 4. So we're going to bump from a 5 up to a 9 on the firewood. And that means that instead of being, if we were at 5, we would only see 1 creature approaching our campfire. But now that we've added firewood to the fire, it's a lot lighter. We can see 1 more creature. We can see 2 creatures now. So the next thing we need to do is we go into the combat phase. In the combat phase, we start by taking the number of creatures equal to our location. So in this case, we have 6 creatures. So we're going to draw 6 creatures off the top of the creature deck. That's 5, 1 more. And we're going to put them in order, face down, approaching the camp. Now I'm going to place them this way, just in an order of basically 2 rows of 3, so that we can see them a little easier. You can also start them kind of this direction, going as they're approaching the campfire. You can do it that way as well. I like to do this way. That way it keeps everything, especially here on camera, it'll keep everything facing the same direction for us and a little easier to read and see. Because our campfire is at 9, we can see 2 creatures. That means we get to reveal the first 2 creatures in the line. So, we've revealed a forest giant. The forest giant says that it's an ongoing ability. The forest giant, his health is always combined with the creature behind it. So we reveal the next creature in line if necessary. It's not necessary in this case because we also revealed the metal golem, who has a health of 8. No direct attacks can be assigned to creatures in line behind the metal golem. So we have to defeat the metal golem before we can defeat any creatures behind it. And the forest giant, because his health is combined with the creature behind it, this is actually a 15 health instead of an 8. So we've got a little bit of work to do on knocking these creatures down. And we do so by spending the dice that have been rolled. We can spend dice to activate abilities. So, for example, I could use this Poison Blade ability. This says to double the value of one of your attack dice, +1 for every revealed creature in the line. So if I were to take this 12, or this 6, I could turn it into a 12. We have 2 creatures that would be 14 damage using my Poison Blade. So I could assign a die here and use that Poison Blade. I could also just take the 6 and assign it to a creature. So that would do 6 damage of the 8 to kill the metal golem. It's also important to point out that if you are a melee hero, as our rogue and our dwarf are, they can only attack the first creature in line. Even if there's something that's preventing them from doing so, they can only hit the front one. Our wizard and our elf ranger are both ranged adventurers. They can hit the first 2 creatures in line with their die. So maybe we take from our elf ranger, we take a ranged attack, we assign an 8 down here to this metal golem. That's going to destroy the metal golem. So we're going to pull this out of the room. That does a couple of things for us. First of all, it brings the forest giant back down to a 7 for now. We're going to simply discard the metal golem into a discard pile. The other creatures are going to move up in the line. And since our campfire lets us see 2 creatures, it's going to reveal the next creature in line, which is an Ember Drake. So that's not very good. An Ember Drake has 12 health, who gets combined with the forest giant. So our forest giant is now a 19, and our Ember Drake is a 12. And if the Ember Drake is in the first position, we're going to exhaust 2 adventurer cards, meaning 2 of our adventurer abilities on the adventurers that are fighting are going to get exhausted and flipped face down. And we're going to -3 the fire. So the Ember Drake's going to affect the fire if the Drake happens to move into the first position. And the way that would happen is if we kill the forest giant, it's going to push the Drake up to the first position, and that would activate this. So we probably want to kill the forest Drake, or the Ember Drake, before we kill the forest giant. We're going to continue this way, assigning die to kill animal or to kill creatures. So there's a 12, so let's say our rogue takes the 6. They use their Poison Blade to bump that up to a 12. That kills the Ember Drake. We slide up to the next creatures. We reveal the second one in line because our campfire is still at a 2. Now we have a Fell Beast with a health of 11. And if they get to first position, we're going to draw another creature and place it in front of the Fell Beast. So again, we probably want to kill the Fell Beast before it gets into first position. And a health of 11 means our Forest Giant's health is 18. So the Forest Giant is still hanging out there. So let's say our Wizard just takes these 2, since they can attack ranged. We're going to take the 11. We're going to assign that there, and that's going to kill the Fell Beast. It's going to advance the line of creatures again. We're going to reveal the next card, and this is Goblins. And now the Goblins has a reveal ability, and this says to, when it's revealed, to move Goblins to the first position. So they're going to simply swap places with the Forest Giant. The Forest Giant's health is equal, or the health of the creature behind the Forest Giant gets added. We don't know what that creature is, but it says to reveal if necessary. So we're going to reveal a Treant. So now we have the last 3 creatures. We have a 9 health Treant, who when defeated is going to bump our campfire up 2. We have a Forest Giant who has a health of 16 because he's added the 9 of the Treant. And then our Goblins have a health of 6. So we can come in here and we can do some other abilities. We can assign dice, and we're going to essentially wipe out any of these creatures. If we happen to get through the entire row of creatures, so in this case, if we kill all 6 creatures, we've successfully defended camp. Nothing bad's going to happen, so we don't take any damage. We don't reveal or lose any cards. And then we simply move to the next round. We reveal the next location. We roll our dice. We place someone in camp, and then the other 3 adventurers go out and fight creatures. If, however, let's say we happen to kill the goblins and the forest giant in this case, and we can't kill the treant for whatever reason, the treant is going to storm into camp. He's going to deal 1 damage, according to this 1 on the card. And the 1 damage simply means that one of the adventurers that fought, so either our ranger, our wizard, or our rogue, has to choose and exhaust 1 card. So let's say we exhaust this wizard's curse card. We flip it face down, and it's now grayed out. The treant then, after doing its damage, goes face down and gets added to the horde. So any creatures that you don't defeat get added to the horde. They deal damage and cause you to exhaust cards, meaning you should probably go back to camp and rest. If at any time an adventurer's cards, all 3 cards get exhausted, that particular adventurer is exhausted, wounded, they can't fight. If at any time all 4 adventurers' cards are exhausted, so you have 12 cards that get flipped face down, then you have lost the game. The final round of the game takes place when you flip over the Forbidden Tower, and this of course will happen if your adventurers haven't been exhausted. Before taking this round, you are going to determine if any player is going to go into camp, and any player can do so, or if all 4 of your adventurers are going to go on watch and fight the creatures that are part of the final round. Now, your final round is going to contain a number of creatures, in this case 9 for the Forbidden Tower, and the Forbidden Tower is always going to be your final location. So you're going to have 9 creatures, plus any creatures that are face down in the horde. They are going to get placed at the end of these 9 creatures in line face down. So you're going to have more than 9 creatures, more than likely, that you're going to have to fight throughout there. The round proceeds as normal, with you assigning die to activate special abilities, assign direct damage to creatures, and that will proceed until you have either exhausted all of your heroes through taking damage from creatures, or you've run out of dice to assign, or you've been able to defeat the 9 creatures plus those that were added to the horde. If you do so successfully, you have won the game, and that is how to play Set a Watch. So that is Set a Watch, again designed by Todd Walsh, published by Rock Manor Games, seeking funding on Kickstarter now. This game is, again, it's a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players. What I like about it is the fact that there's first of all, there's a lot of randomness in this game. You're rolling dice. There is some dice mitigation in terms of being able to, maybe I take a 1 or a 2 that I have, and I can use that 1 or 2 to activate one of my powerful character abilities. I really like that aspect, because when you're rolling dice and you're trying to fight creatures that are there and they've got, a certain health amount, you're trying to reach that number. So if you get those 10, 11, 12 health creatures and you've rolled 4s, 5s, and 6s, it's kind of tough. You don't want to use so many dice to defeat one creature, because then you don't have those dice left to defeat some others that are still in the line, and you don't know what those are. So being able to use smaller number dice to activate special abilities that are letting me double a die, or letting me re-roll a die, or just letting me outright do 8 damage to something is really cool. It's a nice way of mitigating that. I love the randomness of the creature deck, not knowing what's there, kind of that tension of, before you reveal the creature, they've stepped into the firelight, so to speak, and you don't know what they are. You don't know what you're up against. And I like that because it definitely ups the replayability and the replay value of this game. You have a deck of creatures. You only use 30 of them in any game. You can set your difficulty. In the overview video, I used the normal difficulty and shuffled in 2 of the summon cards that are there. There's an easy mode that lets you use 1. You can do a hard mode and use 3, or you can use all 4 summon cards. And the summon cards are used to, when you reveal a creature, you flip that creature card over when they stepped into the light. If it's a summon card and not a creature, you immediately replace that summon card with the top card of the Unhallowed deck. So that's how those Unhallowed creatures get into play and come into your camp. And those are the creatures that are really tough to defeat, because they've got larger, they generally have larger health totals. They also have more powerful abilities, and they can affect your campfire and really hurt things. They make other creatures powerful. Some of them bring more creatures in. So it becomes really tough to defeat those Unhallowed. So obviously the more of those summon cards you put in the game, the more difficult things are going to be for your adventuring party. I do like the aspect of having to use 4 characters. I personally don't mind having to multiplay characters if I'm soloing, or even if I'm playing 2 players, each of us having to control 2 characters. I don't mind that, because it gives me choices to make. If I have one character who has three abilities, it can be, if you're playing, let's say you're playing a two-player game and you each have one character, I could see that being really difficult because you don't have the ability to have someone stay back in camp like you would. And if you did, you would only have, if in a two-player game playing one character apiece, someone would do camp and do the camp actions. You'd only have one person going out and using 3 dice to try and fight a line of 6, 7, 8 creatures. It wouldn't work. But I like having 2 characters or 4 characters if you're soloing the game to take a look at and kind of piecemeal, what I want to do and how I want to play those characters off of each other. There are situations where maybe I rolled the dice really well, and it makes sense for the wizard to stay in camp because I rolled 3 4s, and it's a great chance for me to do that. But I may also want to use that character in battle because of their abilities. If they're in camp, they can't use their abilities, their 3-card abilities in battle, unless there's something specific that allows them to do so. Some of the characters have the ability to give an extra die to the adventurers that are out on watch. So there's a lot of, there's some, even though it is random and you're rolling dice, there are some interesting decisions to be made on how to spend those dice, and I really enjoy that. Again, the replay value comes in from the fact that you only use 30 creatures out of the stack of creature cards. I'm sure more creatures are going to get unlocked through stretch goals as the campaign goes on. You also use 8 Unhallowed, and there's a whole deck of Unhallowed in there as well. And you don't know which ones are coming. You could have a big dragon, you could have a big vampire, a giant werewolf, a lich. You don't know what's coming at you until they actually come out of that deck. There are cards that cause things to go into the horde automatically, and if that happens, your horde's getting bigger, you get to the end, and now instead of fighting 9 creatures, maybe you're fighting 15 or 16, and it becomes really tough to try to mitigate those die rolls for that final round. Overall, I really like the game. I definitely really enjoy the artwork of the game. The illustrations on the box are fantastic. The card art is really good. I really like the creatures as well. It does a good job of making the creatures look fierce and terrifying, but they don't look so scary that younger kids couldn't play this game. It doesn't look like, it doesn't have that look that's going to scare younger kids. There's a bear, and the bear looks, he's growling, but he doesn't have blood coming off of his face or anything like that. So I like that they made that choice as well. Overall, I would recommend checking this game out. It's a lot of fun if you're into co-op games, if you're into the fantasy setting, if you don't mind randomness in your games and rolling dice. This is a game for you. Feel free to drop comments below, questions, comments. I'll answer those as best of my ability. And until next time, keep gaming, friends.